What does it mean to be an adult? Most of us associate adulthood with external milestones: getting a job, paying bills, starting a family, or simply reaching a certain age. But is that really what makes someone an adult? Carl Jung, one of the most profound thinkers of the 20th century, would argue otherwise. He believed that adulthood isn't defined by the external trappings of life, but by an internal transformation, one that many people never experience. And if he's right, most of us are still stuck in a kind of extended adolescence, no matter how old we are. Jung's work revolves around the idea of individuation, a process of becoming your true self. It's not about achieving societal goals or meeting expectations. It's about uncovering who you are beneath all the roles, labels, and masks you wear. According to Jung, adulthood begins when you stop living according to others' expectations and start living in alignment with your own inner truth. And here's the uncomfortable part: many people never reach this stage. They stay stuck in what Jung called the persona, a socially acceptable version of themselves that hides their deeper, more authentic nature. Think about it. How much of your life is shaped by what others expect of you? Your job, your relationships, your daily routines, how much of it reflects who you truly are, and how much of it is a performance? Jung believed that this performance is necessary to some extent. As children, we learn to adapt to our environment, to fit in, to be accepted. But at some point, those adaptations become a cage. Instead of growing into our true selves, we get stuck in the roles we've been playing. This isn't just a philosophical idea. You can see it everywhere. People who are successful by society's standards but feel empty inside. People who follow all the rules but secretly yearn for something more. People who are afraid to ask themselves what they really want because they're scared of the answer. According to Jung, these are signs of a life lived on the surface, a life that hasn't yet moved into true adulthood.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
But why is this so common? Why do so many of us get stuck? One reason is fear. Becoming an adult in Jung's sense requires facing uncomfortable truths about yourself and the world. It requires questioning everything you've been taught, letting go of the safety of your persona, and diving into the unknown. That process is messy, painful, and uncertain. It's much easier to stay where you are, to keep playing the role you've been assigned. Another reason is distraction. In today's world, it's easier than ever to avoid self-reflection. We fill our lives with work, entertainment, and endless to-do lists. We convince ourselves that we're too busy to think deeply about who we are and what we want. But the truth is, these distractions are often a way of avoiding the deeper questions that Jung believed are essential for true adulthood. Here's where it gets even more challenging. The process of individuation isn't something you can achieve through external success or intellectual understanding. It requires engaging with your unconscious mind, the part of you that holds your fears, desires, and unresolved conflicts. This is what Jung called shadow work, the process of facing and integrating the parts of yourself that you'd rather ignore. Shadow work is uncomfortable because it forces you to confront the aspects of yourself that don't fit your ideal image. But it's also liberating. When you integrate your shadow, you become whole. You're no longer divided between who you are and who you think you should be. And that's what adulthood is really about: not reaching a certain age or achieving certain goals, but becoming whole. Let's pause here and ask a difficult question. How much of your life is guided by fear? Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of not being enough. These fears are often what keep us trapped in adolescence, clinging to our personas instead of stepping into our true selves. But fear doesn't have to be the enemy. Jung believed that facing your fears is the first step toward freedom. When you stop running from them, they lose their power over you. This brings us to another key idea in Jung's philosophy, the importance of meaning. True adulthood isn't just about becoming who you are, it's about finding a sense of purpose that goes beyond yourself. Jung believed that meaning is essential for psychological health. Without it, we feel lost, empty, and disconnected. But meaning isn't something you can find outside of yourself. It's something you create by living in alignment with your true self. Think about the choices you've made in your life. How many of them were driven by a sense of meaning, and how many were driven by a desire to fit in, avoid conflict, or meet expectations? This isn't about judging yourself. It's about being honest. If you want to move into true adulthood, you have to start making choices that reflect who you are, not who you think you're supposed to be. To close this part, let's reflect on what Jung's ideas mean for us today. Adulthood isn't about checking off boxes or reaching milestones. It's about embarking on the inner journey of individuation, facing your fears, integrating your shadow, and living in alignment with your true self. And while that journey is challenging, it's also the most rewarding thing you can do. Because when you live as your authentic self, you don't just grow, you thrive. Let's take this further. If adulthood, as Carl Jung described it, begins with the process of individuation, becoming your true self, then the first step is unmasking yourself. It's about recognizing the difference between who you are and the persona you've built to navigate the world. And let's be clear, this isn't easy. Most of us don't even realize we're wearing a mask. It's so deeply ingrained in how we live that it feels like part of who we are. The persona, according to Jung, is a social construct. It's the version of you that interacts with the world, shaped by your upbringing, culture, and the expectations of those around you. It's not inherently bad, it's a necessary tool for survival and connection. But problems arise when you mistake the persona for your true self. When your sense of identity is based entirely on external validation, you lose touch with the deeper parts of yourself. And that's where the journey begins, by asking who you are when no one is watching. Think about the roles you play in your life. At work, you might be the competent professional. At home, the supportive partner or parent. Among friends, the funny one, the responsible one, or the listener. These roles serve a purpose, but they can also become limiting if they don't allow room for your full self to emerge. How often do you suppress parts of yourself to fit into these roles? How often do you avoid expressing your true feelings because they don't align with the image you want to project? Unmasking yourself starts with awareness. Begin by observing how you present yourself in different situations. Are there moments when you feel like you're performing rather than being? Moments when you hold back because you're afraid of how others might react? This isn't about judging yourself. It's about getting curious. The more you notice these patterns, the more you can begin to separate your persona from your true self. Once you've started to recognize your persona, the next step is confronting your shadow. The shadow is the part of yourself that you've pushed into the unconscious because it doesn't fit your ideal self-image. It holds your fears, insecurities, and impulses, but also your untapped potential and creativity. The shadow isn't inherently negative. It's simply the part of you that you've ignored or rejected. Jung believed that integrating the shadow is essential for individuation. But how do you confront something you've spent your life avoiding? One way is through self-reflection. Pay attention to your trigger situations or people that provoke strong emotional reactions. Often these reactions are clues to your shadow. For example, if you're quick to judge someone for being arrogant, it might be because you've repressed your own need for confidence or recognition. The traits we dislike in others often mirror the parts of ourselves we're unwilling to face. Another way to engage with your shadow is through creative expression. Writing, art, music, these are powerful tools for exploring the parts of yourself that don't fit neatly into your persona. Creativity allows you to bypass the filters of your conscious mind and connect with deeper truths. It's not about creating something perfect. It's about giving yourself permission to express what's inside, even if it's messy or uncomfortable. As you begin to integrate your shadow, you'll notice something remarkable: the fear and resistance you once felt start to dissolve. When you accept the parts of yourself you've been avoiding, they lose their power over you. You become less reactive, less controlled by unconscious patterns. And in their place, you find a sense of wholeness, a feeling that you're no longer at war with yourself. But individuation isn't just about unmasking yourself and integrating your shadow. It's also about creating a life that reflects your true self. This requires courage because it often means stepping away from the expectations of others. It means making choices that align with your values, even if they're not popular or easy. And it means taking responsibility for your own happiness, rather than waiting for someone else to provide it. Let's talk about responsibility for a moment. In Jung's view, true adulthood begins when you stop blaming others for your circumstances and start owning your life. This doesn't mean you're to blame for everything that happens to you. It means recognizing that you have the power to choose how you respond. It means letting go of victimhood and stepping into agency. But taking responsibility also means facing uncertainty. When you let go of the persona and start living as your true self, there are no guarantees. You might fail, you might be rejected, you might discover that the path you thought was right for you isn't after all. But that's the point. True adulthood isn't about avoiding failure or discomfort. It's about embracing them as part of the process. Here's where it gets practical. Start small. Identify one area of your life where you feel out of alignment, where you're living according to expectations rather than your own truth. Maybe it's a job that doesn't fulfill you, a relationship where you're not fully yourself, or a habit that no longer serves you. What's one step you can take to bring that area closer to who you really are? It doesn't have to be drastic. The smallest step can create momentum. As you take these steps, remember that the process of individuation is lifelong. There's no finish line, no moment when you've arrived, and that's a good thing. Growth is a continuous process, and each stage of life brings new opportunities to deepen your understanding of yourself. The goal isn't perfection. It's authenticity. To close this part, let's reflect on what it means to become an adult in the Jungian sense. It's not about shedding your persona entirely. That's impossible, and not even desirable. The persona has its place, but it's about not being ruled by it. It's about integrating all parts of yourself, including the shadow, and using that wholeness to create a life that feels true. It's about moving beyond fear and distraction, taking responsibility for your choices, and living with a sense of purpose. Now that we've explored the foundation of Carl Jung's idea of adulthood and how individuation begins, let's focus on the most challenging part: staying on the path. The process of individuation is not a straight line. It's messy, full of resistance, and often feels like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But that's exactly what makes it transformative. It's not about reaching some final destination of selfhood. It's about learning how to thrive while navigating the uncertainty and complexity of being your true self. One of the first challenges you'll face is resistance, not just from others, but from yourself. The persona you've built over your life isn't just a mask. It's a source of comfort, a shield against vulnerability. Letting go of it, even partially, can feel like stepping into a void. You might hear an inner voice saying things like, "Who are you to live differently?" Or what if people don't accept the real you? This resistance isn't a sign that you're on the wrong path. It's a sign that you're doing something meaningful. Resistance often comes from fear of failure, rejection, or uncertainty. But here's the thing about fear: it's a natural part of growth. If you're not afraid, you're probably not challenging yourself. Jung believed that the most profound transformations happen when we face what we fear most. So instead of running from resistance, lean into it. Ask yourself, what is this fear trying to protect me from? And what would happen if I moved forward anyway? Another challenge is dealing with external expectations. As you begin to live more authentically, you might notice pushback from people around you. Not because they don't care, but because your growth challenges their perception of you and sometimes their perception of themselves. This is especially true in close relationships. When you change, it forces others to confront their own resistance to change. Navigating this requires empathy and boundaries. Understand that their discomfort isn't about you, it's about them. At the same time, don't let their expectations dictate your choices. Living authentically doesn't mean abandoning others or becoming selfish. It means showing up as your whole self and inviting others to do the same. The people who truly value you will adapt and grow with you. Those who don't may drift away, and while that's painful, it's also part of the process. Now let's talk about uncertainty. The path of individuation is uncharted territory. There's no guidebook, no roadmap, no guarantees. That can feel terrifying, especially if you're used to living by clear rules and expectations. But uncertainty isn't something to avoid. It's where creativity, growth, and possibility live. Think of uncertainty as a blank canvas. It's not a void, it's an opportunity. When you stop trying to control every outcome and start embracing the unknown, you open yourself up to experiences and insights you never could have planned for. This doesn't mean you should abandon all structure or planning. It means holding your plans loosely, allowing room for spontaneity and adaptation. Here's a practical way to navigate uncertainty: focus on the process, not the outcome. Instead of asking, "Am I succeeding?" ask, "Am I learning?" Instead of aiming for perfection, aim for growth. This shift in mindset allows you to stay engaged with the journey, even when the destination isn't clear. It helps you see challenges not as obstacles, but as opportunities to deepen your understanding of yourself and the world. Another essential part of individuation is finding meaning. Jung believed that meaning is not something you discover, it's something you create. It's not about waiting for life to hand you a sense of purpose. It's about choosing what matters to you and living in alignment with those values. This might sound daunting, but it's incredibly liberating. It means you have the power to shape your life, even in the face of uncertainty. Start by asking yourself what makes you feel alive. What activities, relationships, or goals bring you a sense of fulfillment? These are clues to what matters most to you. And once you've identified them, the next step is to prioritize them. This might mean making difficult choices, letting go of commitments or habits that don't align with your values, even if they feel safe or comfortable. But every time you say no to something that doesn't matter, you're saying yes to something that does. Let's address one more challenge: staying grounded. As you go through the process of individuation, it's easy to get overwhelmed by the intensity of self-discovery. You might find yourself questioning everything, feeling disconnected from your old identity but not yet fully rooted in your new one. This in-between stage is called the liminal space, and it's both uncomfortable and essential. To stay grounded during this time, focus on what anchors you. This might be relationships, routines, or practices that help you feel connected to yourself and the world. Journaling, meditation, or spending time in nature can be powerful tools for reflection and grounding. These practices don't just help you navigate uncertainty, they help you appreciate the journey itself. Let's pause here and consider a question: what does it mean to thrive as your true self? It's not about being perfect or having all the answers. It's about living with integrity, aligning your actions with your values, embracing your imperfections, and staying open to growth. Thriving isn't a destination, it's a way of being. In Jung's view, true adulthood isn't about arriving at a fixed identity. It's about embracing the fluid, dynamic nature of who you are. It's about recognizing that you are always in process, always becoming. And that's what makes life meaningful. The journey of individuation isn't easy, but it's worth it. Because when you live as your authentic self, you don't just survive, you create a life that feels truly alive. To close this script, let's reflect on one final thought. Most people have never been adults in the Jungian sense, but that doesn't mean they can't start. The path to individuation is always available, no matter where you are in life. It begins with a single decision to look inward, face your fears, and live in alignment with your true self. And while the path is challenging, it's also the most rewarding journey you'll ever take. Because in becoming who you truly are, you don't just grow, you transform.